Folks, welcome back to another edition of the PlayAction Pod presented by PlayActionPools.com. I'm your host, Christian McCullum, and I've got my main man, my real main man here, Lorenzo Reyes. I got a lot of friends on this podcast, people I know, but few go back as far with as Lorenzo Reyes. Lorenzo, what's up, brother?
Not much, man. I am an OG. Like we we go way back, man. I can't tell you how many times Christian, can we swear on this?
Yeah.
How many times Christian saved my ass when I needed help transcribing something, when I was late for an interview, when I was maybe hungover or whatever. I don't know.
When you needed a couch for your apartment, South Bend?
Yes. There were a lot of things. Good times, though.
So I think you remember my brother. I give my brother a hard time. My brother played a little college football, and he's kind of successful. And when he played like FCS college football, he was a mentor for this kid. And the kid does well. The kid actually transferred Power 5. He played at TCU. Then he becomes like a Rhodes Scholar. Then he publishes a book. And like my brother still refers to him as his mentee. I never even heard that word before. But I'm like, bro, I think this relationship has changed, dog. And I think you know where I'm going with this. Lorenzo was an intern for us at Irish Sports Daily. I helped him when he was just getting into this business, and then he goes on to Medill School, journalism, Northwestern. Now he's at USA Today. I think the mentor-mentee relationship has done changed here, Lorenzo.
No, man. No. I still don't know what I'm doing half the time.
Well, you're doing a great job over there. Lorenzo's covering the NFL now for USA Today. He's crushing it. Lorenzo's locks. How are Lorenzo's locks doing?
You know, this is actually an off year, man. I'll say this. The beginnings of the seasons are always weird. It's just like you see what happened in the offseason. You kind of try to guess new coaches, all this stuff. And I always like to ride teams that were good to me the year before. This season, I kind of went away from that. I started 1-6. I have 3 picks each week. I started 1-5. And I'm clawing my way back. I'm I think 2 or 3 over 500 now. So I'm 14 and 7 since week 3. So
well, that's a good little run.
Yeah. I just got to keep it going. But those first 2 weeks fucking killed me. Yeah, I was on the Packers, and then that week 1 game just was. Yeah. So
week 1's always tough. Week 2, you can get the overreactions. So you try to play those overreactions,
right,
from this small sample size. But speaking of wild weeks, I mean, this past week was crazy, right? You had the Broncos winning, Jaguars, Browns. What was that like?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's kind of especially in the NFL season, this happens in college football a little bit too. You the teams that are good maybe start to feel themselves a little bit, and injuries are coming up. So it's there are just a lot of variables. And you also have those teams that are hungry and they know they need to make a win. They need to get a win. I think there was some of that. I want to look at the Cowboys game. I think that offense, they were expecting Dak to come back and everything would be like it was before, and they're still they're nice. I love that team. I mean, I know a lot of people hate the Cowboys, but on paper they're just filthy. And Denver trades Von Miller, and you're thinking it's a wash. They're mailing it in, but they came out hungry, and the Cowboys just could not. It was mistake after mistake, and they just weren't crisp. And it was one of those games you watch the first 5 minutes, and you're they're not. I didn't think they were going to lose, but I knew they weren't going to cover. Mm-hmm. And I was like, well, all right, let's see how it goes. And then it went downhill. The Bills-Jaguars game is one where I'm just what? Yeah, yeah. I mean, it was stunning, and I still like the Bills a lot, but they got to get a running game. I mean, it's clear that if they don't do that, they are going to have inexplicable losses. The thing with Buffalo is it being in the AFC, I think they can afford it because the AFC is just kind of wide open. The NFC is where things are just really, really tight, where a team like the Cowboys, you can't have those losses if you want that 1 seed because home field advantage on the bye. It's different now with the restructured playoffs. Mm-hmm. That's also why the Packers, this Aaron Rodgers thing, it hurts them, obviously, but if I'm them, I'm all right, at least it didn't happen divisional round or NFC championship game or whatever. You would think he'll be all right for late in the season. It's hard to consider that an upset because the Chiefs have been playing so poorly, but the other one, the Browns, that was a team in disarray a little bit. with the whole Odell Beckham Jr. thing. The Bengals were coming in fairly hot. They had that loss against the Jets. I think the Bengals were seeing that their defense, the success they had earlier in the year, that's maybe was more fluke than it was a pattern. The Browns, I mean, they just crushed them every level, and I think the Bengals, while improved, might not be a player in the AFC right now. So yeah, it was nuts though. I mean, I was watching the games. I'm just like, you keep waiting for like the third quarter of the teams to come back, but
I watch Red Zone. That's my thing. And like Scott Hansen was just going nuts. He just loved the idea of this whole Josh Allen.
I know.
He's talking about it before anything happened.
I know.
And then he got the sack. I'm like, oh man, this guy's gonna go nuts. Then he got interception. I'm like, this guy's just gonna be out of his mind. Then he got the fumble recovery. Yeah. That's all he talked about.
Bro, they were doing it for like the late window. Like was almost over, and they were still recapping it.
In case you missed it, like Scott, we did not miss it, and everyone put it on Twitter too. So, I mean, we got a couple good games. There's a lot of kind of stinkers this week, but you were talking about the Browns. Pats Browns coming up here this week. I think it's early line. I think it's like 2.5 or so for the Pats. What do you see there?
This is a hard one to read. I kind of, my first gut here is to go on the Browns. But the Patriots are getting better. I will say that. But the thing with the Pats is like, it's not sexy, Like it's very much like, as long as Mac Jones does not make mistakes, as long as they can run the ball somewhat, as long as the defense doesn't give up explosive plays, they will likely either be in the game or maybe win it, because once they get into the red zone, that defense clamps down. Matt Judon has been an excellent addition. He's really just taken off. But I feel like this Browns team kind of has some juice after the whole OBJ thing. Honestly, it's hard because I'm like one of those, like I always look at trends. I love looking at trends, but I feel like so often when we're putting money on games, we ignore like the stuff that you can't really, like the intangible stuff, the emotional stuff. And I do wonder if like this Browns team now, they feel like, okay, we got some shit off our shoulders. Like we can just be who we are. And Baker, honestly, Baker plays so much better. If you look at the numbers, without Beckham on the field, he is so much better. And he actually pushes the ball downfield even more.
Yep.
I think he was pressing where he felt like he needed to get in the ball, at least look his way. The crazy thing is like that video that his dad, OBJ's dad posted, he wasn't lying. Like Odell was open a lot of the time. But I think it's just like, I mean, I'm sure like you and I are tight, but I'm sure there are guys that you work with at Irish Sports Daily that you're like, oh, I don't know about this guy. And when you don't vibe with someone, the whole, it just, the whole thing is just not right. So my instinct is to go on the Browns.
That whole video thing, like that's like such a PV football dad thing. Like,
I know.
I'm just like, what? Like, I'm like, hey, don't worry about it. This guy's open. He'll be open again. They'll throw it to. Even my son's 12, and he's like, I'm open on this out every time. I'm like, don't worry about it. Like, the guy can't see you. You can't see what's going on back there. I couldn't believe that he posted that. What do you think of Mac, though? I mean, is he better? Is he performing better than you thought? About what you thought? Where do you think he slots in with this quarterback class?
I'll say, hold on. I'll get to Mac. But did you see the Chris Long tweet from this weekend? Mm-mm. So there was that Jarvis Landry pitch to Nick Chubb that was like a terrible. Chris Long tweeted like, I bet Nick Chubb's family is gathering up all the video of Jarvis Landry doing poor pitches to him.
Oh, and the option, that little, was that the 2-point play, or is it 3rd and goal or something?
It was something in the red zone down there. I saw that and I was howling. It was one of the best tweets of the weekend. But I think Mac, honestly, I was kind of a Mac hater. Not a hater, but I just like, when the draft was rolling around and people were talking about the Niners maybe taking him, I was like, listen, Mac's a nice quarterback. He has good tools, but like, why would you want to take a guy like that in the top 5? I think he's like, it was kind of like with the Giants taking Daniel Jones. Like, I don't. If you think he's your guy, that's great. But you also have the number 6 pick. You can wait. You can trade down. You can do like that. it's all about maximizing where you are and getting value out of. I mean, you know this. Anyway, so I was down on Mac in the sense that I thought there were better players, but in this system, I think he's done really, really well. Granted, I don't think they're asking him to do a ton, but what they're asking him to do, he is doing really well. I think the thing with Mac is that, like, this still, they've beefed up their tight ends and all that, but this is still not like a really dynamic skill set. They don't have really like stud weapons at receiver. I mean, there's some nice players, but you don't have guys that are like the top of the league or anything like that. And he's made them okay. Like he's at least elevating them in that sense. I think he's also good at not forcing throws. I think he knows when to check down or when to like go to his second or third option when stuff's covered downfield. That I think is what's making him successful. I think like stylistically people say like, oh, he looks like Tom Brady. Like, okay, let's chill a little bit. But like he does have similar elements in his game. So I think it's a great fit, but I still feel like they need to give him some more weapons. I mean, they gotta give him some more juice. But for now, I mean, what do you think? Don't you think he's done pretty good?
I think he's done great. I think the biggest thing is that he knows his role. Kind of like you said, he's not trying to do too much. In going to that system, it's very easy to just trust it. I mean, especially Saban and Belichick are so close. I'm sure that he can lean on Saban. And, I mean, what are you going to question Bill Belichick anyways? Yeah. But they can just come in and just say, hey, listen, this is all – do your job. That's the Patriots thing. Yeah. Do your job. This is all we're asking you to do. Don't try to be Tom Brady. Tom Brady wasn't Tom Brady when he started playing either. Yeah. So I think that, I think that's the biggest thing is him being able to know his role, not try to do too much, and do his job. Patriots are 1.5 by the way in that game. The other game, another game is Titans minus 2.5. I like this Tennessee team, and I don't. The Derrick Henry, that injury doesn't really scare me that much. I like Tannehill, and you talk about weapons. He's got weapons. What do you think about this one?
I think take that Jets loss out. Mm-hmm. And since then, I think they've ripped off 5 in a row. The difference has been that their defensive line, they're getting pressure rushing 3 and 4 guys constantly. This game against the Rams, they harassed Matt Stafford, rushing 4 dudes. And, like, you look at their depth on the defensive line. It's guys that have had, like, solid careers, but, like, Jeffrey Simmons, I think, went in with like 7.5 sacks in his career. Yeah. And he got 3 on Sunday night. You're right. I mean, this Titans team, like the Derrick Henry thing sucks, man. I wish that he would be there because I think they could be a legitimate AFC championship contender. Is Adrian Peterson going to, like, no. Like, I think AP's been great, but I think they should still look elsewhere for depth and backup there. But this defense, man, as long as they can get pressure and they're not blitzing, that's the thing. Like they don't need to do that. So you have all this guy, you have these guys in the back in the secondary, they can drop back, and the Rams' offense is one of the best in the league.
Oh yeah. And
Cooper Kupp had been going off and all this stuff, and they shut them down. So going to the Saints, or the Saints are coming to them. Yeah, I mean, I actually picked the Falcons upset. The Simeon coming in the week before in the middle of the game, I think that was fine. But an entire game plan around Trevor Simeon and a defense able to figure out what they would likely do. It's tough because New Orleans, their window is kind of like really rapidly shrinking, but. Yeah, I like Tennessee here a lot. The problem with Tennessee, though, is like a lot of teams. But like Tennessee, actually the Saints do this a lot. The Vikings always do this. They're like, you look at this matchup and you're like, oh, like there's no way they should lose this game. And then every now and then they just like, there's this dud, man, and it comes out of nowhere. And it was literally the Jets game. That was it.
I think the quarterback has a lot to do with that. You know what I mean? Like the quarterback, when the quarterback is good, but he might be inconsistent and shows flashes, that's where I think you get the dud game. And don't get me started with the Vikings and Kirk Cousins either. I mean,
Man. Those guys, like I was actually kind of high on them coming into the year, and after a few weeks, like I'm actively looking to bet against them now. Like,
yeah,
that's how it is. But I'm also like I'm also just when teams are on a little streak like this, when they've won 5 in a row, like even the Cowboys, they were 7-0 against the spread coming into last week. I kind of had a feeling that like I thought they would win, but I didn't think they would cover. And then I punked out and I picked them to win by one more than what the spread was. But yeah, so I'm wary of the Titans maybe having that letdown, especially after such a big game. So, man, this shit's hard. It's so hard. It's so hard. I like literally I spend hours like looking at these games, and my editors are like, "Hey, so what picks are you making?" I'm like, come on, man, don't rush me. But like, it's so difficult. It's so difficult.
So who are you taking?
I'm picking the Titans here.
Okay.
I'm picking the Titans here.
You know, one team that I've realized, like, one thing that happens when these juggernauts, when they fall hard. It's not like a gradual thing. So once I saw the Chiefs, I gave them a pass early in the season, but after like 2 weeks, 3 weeks, I'm like, that ain't the Chiefs. This is not your mother's Chiefs, and it's gonna take the public a long time to realize that. And I'm to be honest, I'm surprised that it's taken them this long. I mean, the Chiefs, it's just not the same. And they're favored by 2.5 this week against the Raiders. Raiders have a plethora of their own issues that are more important than football. But, you know, if this is a rivalry game, you know, obviously I think probably the look-ahead line would have been way higher than this. But I still just think that the public it's going to be hard for the public to go against the Chiefs, and I think Vegas knows that, not the Raiders, the guys in Vegas.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, man, I mean, like, this has been going on for a little bit longer than the season, though. Like, I think the Chiefs have actually, I've been playing against them for a while. I think in the last, like, 19, they're, like, 3-15-1. I don't even know if that is up to 19. My math is terrible. I'm sure you remember this. Christian also, when we were reporting together, like, I would need him to double check on math all the time. Like, even with a calculator, I fucked things up. Anyway, the Chiefs, they are not covering. But you're right. It's because Vegas knows that after their ascendancy and how explosive they were, that fans see like, oh, the Chiefs like getting like 4 points or whatever. Like, of course, people are going to put money on that. But just you look at recent history, and they have not been performing, and they have some serious issues on the offensive line. It's really, really bad, to the point where it's affecting Mahomes. And I think he knows in his, like, I was about to, like, bring back examples of Notre Dame quarterbacks that we covered and turnover issues. And, like, even the best one, I think the best one when I was there was Jimmy. When the rest of the team fell apart around him, it's too much. The player knows that he has talent. He knows that there's no one else on the field who's better than him. But he presses, and he forces throws that he shouldn't force. Part of it was because the defense was so bad that I think Pat was thinking, like, we need to put up 30. And that's why you saw those turnover issues. I will say the defense the last 2 weeks has been playing better. I'm not ready to say, like, oh, the Chiefs' defense is back. They need, like Frank Clark needs to get going again. But like Daniel Sorensen in the secondary, that's just, it's rough back there for him. But as long as the defense can just keep things manageable, I think that's okay, because the Chiefs still have so many weapons that, like, I hear you, I hear what you're saying, but I'm still thinking like AFC, like when I'm thinking of AFC Super Bowl contenders, like I still kind of have the Chiefs there where I'm like, oh, they'll be back. But they need to figure some shit out though, because if they don't, it's gonna be bad. The offensive line is a problem. Like they need to figure that out. With this game though, oh man, I've literally gone against the Chiefs probably like the last 3, 4, or 5 weeks, or whenever I don't know if they've had their bye yet, but I think I'm gonna pick them to cover here. I feel like you're judging me. I saw a look.
This could be, square play. Here's the thing. Another thing with Mahomes that I think is kind of overlooked a little bit is his arm is so talented, and early in his career, just people just like even coaching staff just falling in love with that and letting him do things that quarterbacks aren't supposed to do because he can do it and get away with it. I mean, those are still bad habits, right?
Yeah.
Those are still bad habits, and they're hard to kill. And I mean, the no-look throws are good when they're like, there's a reason for them, but there's not a reason for them. Like, you can't be making no-look throws. Like, it's just silly, and just throwing across your body into coverage. Guys are covered. You're Tyreek Hill, he's not going to be running by people anymore because they're not going to give him that. Yeah. So I think a lot of these habits they're hard to reverse.
Yeah, and the most concerning thing is that, like, I think the blueprint's out. Mm-hmm. Like, you drop 2 safeties and try to generate pressure and get in Mahomes' face, which, again, a lot of quarterbacks would struggle with that. But it was just, I think it's what you're saying, when his first 2 seasons, it seemed like defenses couldn't figure out what to do. Like, they were trying everything, and it was not working. But I mean, you're right. When a quarterback like starts thinking like, oh, like I can do whatever, it can be problematic, especially if it's a tight game, especially if the team you're playing against is like hungry and a good team. The no-look throws thing bothers me too, because every time there's a no-look throw, and it could be like a 4-yard gain, people go nuts.
Yep.
And you see like on Twitter like, oh, no-look throw, whatever. I don't know, man. That's fine. Like, I'm good if you're up 14, whatever. But
or if there's a reason for it, right? Like, I just think there's reasons for it sometimes. Yeah. But you talked about it a little bit. Give me a couple contenders from each conference here.
Oh man! All right, I'm gonna start with the AFC because it's kind of a mess. And like I'll have a quick caveat here. I am super petty with this stuff. Like, I was all in on the Ravens, like, for 3 years in a row. And they continually let me down to the point where I'm just like, I'm done. They have a nice team. I'm not going to put them there. I'm not going to do it. I want to stick with the Bills. I think they're a good team. I think they need to figure out their running game. They just have to be consistent with it. For some reason they go away. And then Josh Allen, also, like he is a weapon running the football, but I don't think he can be your leading rusher. And I think those are issues that are easily fixed. Like I said, I like the Chiefs, but I mean they have some work to do. The Titans, I like the Titans. I like the Titans with the caveat that Ryan Tannehill will have to step up a little bit with Derrick Henry out. His play is going to have to be better. And what made the Titans so dangerous last year, and I think the year before too, was that they were just dominant in the red zone. I think they were scoring touchdowns at like 89 point something %, which was just wild. Mm-hmm. This year they've reverted. They've regressed a little bit. I think they're middle of the pack. They're like at 70 or 68, something like that. They need when they can't settle for field goals, especially when you don't have Derrick Henry, because Derrick Henry is one of those players that he just changes the game. Especially when you have a little lead, like you just keep feeding him, and it's like he's just grinding the other defense down. And it's. I think of that Patriots playoff loss. Was that last year? Or was that 2 years ago?
2 years ago. Yep.
Derrick Henry's one of those dudes that like gets better as the game goes on. Like, I can't imagine playing against him. Can you imagine? Like,
I saw him at the opening, and he looked like he was just as big as he is now. And I saw him at the Nike employee store last time we were out at the opening. We were shopping in the same aisle.
Yeah, man. I've stood next to him one time in the locker room, and I was like,
big man. That's a big man. You don't even know how to tackle him.
I only had that with one other player, and that was Cam Wake, where I stood next to him. I was like, oh, man, this guy, he's shredded. But anyway, yeah, so the Derrick Henry thing stinks. But anyway, I'm going long here. I would say the Bills, the Titans. Give me the Chiefs. Give me the Chiefs as a little dark horse.
And NFC, you mentioned you like the Cowboys, though.
I like the Cowboys. I like the Cowboys. I don't like Mike McCarthy. I should say that. Mm-hmm. I think often his game management stuff is questionable. For some reason, the Cowboys have had this for years. But the Cardinals, I think we definitely have to put the Cardinals in there. I mean, what they did to San Francisco without their top quarterback, who's an MVP candidate at this point, without an All-Pro receiver, and their star running back he's knocked out after one play, and they go on the road, which San Francisco is terrible on the road. That's another thing. If the Niners are at home, go against them. Literally, go. They haven't won in their last 11 or something. But still, that's a huge victory against a division rival. And the Packers lost. That's fine. That's another legitimate NFC contender. So that loss doesn't concern me. They're a young team where they're young, but they also have veterans. It's kind of, I guess they're young at quarterback where I don't know that Kyler in the playoffs I think is going to be really fascinating.
Yep.
So they're in there for sure, and I'm going to put the Packers in, man. Actually, the Rams are nice.
I was going to say, what about the Rams?
Yeah, the Rams are nice too. Dang, and you had Von Miller. Oof, that's going to be filthy, man.
Yeah, that's why, like you said, the NFC is tough.
It's so hard. That's why you can't I look at this Cowboys loss against the Broncos. Actually, the strengths of the schedule of the top 5 teams in the conference are relatively similar, as far as winning percentages and all that. The Cowboys do play the Cardinals, which I think is going to be a really interesting game in a few weeks. But the Rams, yeah, you got to throw them in there too, right? All right, so I'm going to put Cowboys, Cardinals, Rams,
Packers.
Yeah.
I'll take 2. I'll just take 2. All those teams are contenders. But if you said, hey, who's going to play in the Super Bowl? I'm going Bills, Rams. I think that's it. I think what McVay and Stafford are going to do together is just otherworldly. And I think that the Bills, I just think they have it, like you said, with a weaker AFC. I think this is Josh Allen. I think this is it for him. Josh Allen, the quarterback.
Yeah. And that coaching staff is tremendous too.
Yep.
I think they've hit a rough patch, especially on offense. But Brian Daboll's, I mean, he's one of the best.
He'll be a head coach soon.
He'd be a head coach literally tomorrow.
Yeah.
So I think they will figure that out. I picked them in the preseason to be my Super Bowl. They were my Super Bowl pick.
Nice.
I had them in the Packers, so I feel like I should probably stick with that. But I don't know, man. I don't know. The NFC, it's. I'll tell you what. The AFC is wide open and it's fun, but I feel like the NFC is just gonna be ruthless in the playoffs.
And you mentioned the new format where it's only one team getting a bye. I bet you'll see some teams. I mean, these are rolls of the dice when you're playing a game. We had big debates about the new college football format, how Notre Dame can't get a bye. I don't think people overlooked that about, you're going out there to play someone. I don't care if it's the 12th team in the country. That's a roll of the dice, man.
Yeah. And, you also look, so often it was oh, we can rest guys the last week of the season. I don't think that's the case anymore.
Yep.
Especially with the season extended another week.
Yep.
It's going to be really interesting because I expect those 4 teams that I mentioned. I think they're going to be. We have the potential where either one of them could get the 1 seed, literally going into the final week or 2 weeks of the season. So that means that injuries are going to be key too. If you lose key players, especially with COVID stuff, if you have a guy go down because of COVID, he's ineligible. If I'm coaches, I'm saying listen, man, please stay home. Wear a hazmat suit. I don't care, man. Because can you imagine? It would just be heartbreaking to
It's gonna happen at some point. It might not be the NFC, but it's gonna happen.
Especially as the weather changes and these things just advance more. It's gonna be really, really interesting. So that's why I always I love when lines in the beginning of the week are ooh, you see a line, you're oh man, I got to get on that. That was literally, I had the Packers as one of my locks, for the video, and then I changed it because I had to. Even though they still covered. But
Breaking news.
Yeah.
Well, follow Lorenzo if you can get Lorenzo's locks at Lorenzo G Reyes on Twitter. All his stuff on USA Today, does a great job. I guess he said I can still call him my mentor.
Of course, man. Of course.
Or I'm his mentor, whatever it's going to be. You're my mentee,
always,
as Ryan would say.
always.
So, all right, we really appreciate it, Lorenzo, man. We'll be following you and checking out your picks throughout the season, and you're on a good run.
Anytime, Chris. Thanks for having me, man.